Welcome to Skin Earth Vitality, where ancient wisdom meets modern vitality. I'm Emily Davis, a holistic esthetician and herbalist. Join me as we unlock the secrets of ancient skincare practices, explore the beauty of seasonal living, herbalism, and true holistic well-being for you and the broader ecosystem. I'm so grateful that you are here spending your time with me today. I don't take that lightly, so thank you. As we get started, I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge and just sit with the announcement that Danna Omari of Noi Skincare passed through the veil earlier this month. And I just wanted to take a second to acknowledge her for what she's done for the facial massage and holistic aesthetics community. I didn't know her and she didn't know me, but she was a huge influence on me as I was pivoting my business into more of a holistic space. And as I was pivoting my niche more into facial massage, I discovered her, I think it was right around when the pandemic started on Instagram, and I just really fell in love with everything that she and a couple of other pioneers were sharing. I've seen a huge outpouring of love from our community, and it's really gotten me thinking about what a supremely special time it is that we live in, where there are so many more people who are able to touch the lives of others than ever before. And I think that's really some of the magic of social media, that somebody like Danna was able to share her light that was so bright and bring awareness to what it is to radiate in your raw beauty. And she was able to teach people how to feel and look their best through facial massage and through other non-invasive modalities. And I'm so immensely grateful that she did decide to show up in that way, because I really admired how she presented herself on the internet. She was so unproblematic, and she was never dogging on what other people were doing. She was really just coming to the table, sharing love and sharing her love for the practice. And I just thought it would be appropriate, especially in this episode, to take a moment to recognize her. She will be greatly missed. She was truly a pioneer and so beautiful and elegant and graceful. And we definitely lost such an amazing person way too soon. Today, I'm talking about facial oils and moisturizers. This is the fourth in a series that I'm doing about how to demystify skincare. And this series and this episode are for you if you feel lost in the skincare aisle, or if you feel dependent on somebody else to tell you what good skincare is because you maybe don't know what to look for on an ingredient deck, or you're not sure about the difference between oils or what oil is appropriate for your skincare or for your skin. And so I made this for you so that you could feel empowered when you're shopping and not feel like you have to depend on what the person on TikTok is saying worked for their unique skin. You'll know what works for your unique skin. And as we get into this, I also want to note that April in my community, Rooted Well, is all about connecting with your raw beauty. It's about connecting with facial massage as a form of skincare. It's about how to best DIY some of your own skincare without using ingredients that are going to disrupt your skin. And it's also about how beauty is deeper than skin deep. We are currently running the beta version of this community, and it's something that I feel deeply passionate about and am excited to share about. So, if you would like to learn more about this community, you can head to my website, stratumaesthetics.com, or I will put a link in the show notes where you can read more about Rooted Well. As I started to put together my talking points for this podcast, I realized that there's so much to consider about the world of oils. It's a huge topic. I could break each subtopic down that I chose to talk about today into its own episode. But what I want to do with this episode is take a meta look and gear it toward how to decide what oils to use for your skin as a consumer. I know that I have a lot of estheticians that listen in, and so there also will be a lot of value for you as well. I am basically saying all of the things that I wish that skincare school would have taught me about oils that I've learned over the years through research, through my courses with organic skincare formulation, from working as an educator for a professional skincare brand. And so there's lots of value for you as well if you are an esthetician. Today, I am going to break down the chemical composition of oils. And I promise it's not going to be me droning on about chemistry. I'm going to make it very accessible to you, even if you're not a chemist or a skincare formulator. I am going to talk about polyunsaturated fatty acids and the debate around them. I'm going to talk about tallow and the debate around that. Those are both hotly debated in the wellness community. And I'm going to give you my lens as a holistic esthetician and as somebody who loves to look at things from that chemical standpoint. And I'm also going to talk about moisturizers and what you want to watch out for when it comes to a moisturizer to support your skin barrier. I love oil application. It was the first thing that got me excited about skincare. I remember when I first started aesthetic school, we were given a skincare kit and we learned on Dermalogica. And I remember Dermalogica has this oil cleanser called Pre-Cleanse, and it smells so good. And I remember opening that up and I remember utilizing it on my skin for the first time. And it just opened the door to a lifelong love affair. Um, Oil application, massage, this is all at the heart of what I do. And the practice of applying oil to the body, whether it be the body, the face, the scalp, is so much more than what we see on the surface. Anytime that I start to think that skincare is consumerist vanity, I remember that applying oil to our skin predates the written word, and it was referenced for its medicinal value in the most early medical texts. It's one of the oldest practices of medicine, but in our human history, it's served as so much more than that. It's been a form of protection, both physically, spiritually, and emotionally. Physically, oils protect us from elements, from extreme heat, from the sun, from a dry climate. They protect us from the cold. In more northern climates, heavier animal fats were used to protect from the harsh elements. spiritually, anointing oils have been a beautiful connection to the divine. In ancient Egypt, they would embalm bodies utilizing anointing oils to protect from evil spirits. And emotionally, ever since I heard the herbalist Cammie McBride, who, if you have any interest in oils or if you have interest in infusing your own oils, she offers a really great course about oil infusion. She's amazing. Look her up. She's got some great books. But she talks about body oiling to support the nervous system and reduce anxiety. And ever since I heard that for the first time, I saw body oiling in a whole new light. She particularly discusses the way that St. John's wort oil coats the nerve endings on the skin, supporting and soothing our emotional body. And this makes so much sense because St. John's wort oil is really lovely. It has an affinity for the nervous system in the skin, and it can provide relief for nerve pain or itchy skin. It does have to be infused fresh to get those properties, so you can grow it and infuse your own oil, or you can purchase a St. John's wort oil. I get mine from Mountain Rose Herbs. But it's just, I think I've been doing it ever since I heard Cammie talking about it. And she talks about it like it's this coat of armor that protects you from the world. And I just think about that in the morning when I'm applying this oil, and I think about how it's like getting me ready for the day. It's creating this bubble around me, and it's been really potent medicine. Ayurveda has an ancient practice of body oiling called abhyanga, utilizing oils to counteract imbalances. So, heavier warming oils and grounding oils like sesame and mustard seed during brittle, flighty, windy winter months is really helpful for that balance. Or lighter cooling oils during the heat of the summer, like coconut oil or hemp seed oil, can help to fight the imbalance of that pitta season in the summer. Because it's something that we've engaged in since the beginning and it's such a beautiful practice, my invitation to you is to release some of that conditioning that tells you to fear oil on your skin. That's purely marketing from the beauty industry. And there is an oil for every skin type. So we'll talk about that today. I first want to address that I'm not talking about essential oils here. I'm talking about oils that are known as carrier oils. These are usually derived from the fatty portions of plants like seeds or nuts or kernels. Examples of carrier oils are almond oil, olive oil, pomegranate seed, sea buckthorn, rosehip seed oil, black cumin oil, jojoba oil, although that is technically a wax that comes from a seed and not an oil. And opposed to carrier oils, essential oils are concentrated extracts obtained from different parts of the plant, like the flower or the leaves, even the bark or the roots. And it's extracted generally through a steam distillation or through cold pressing or from a solvent extraction. And so these are the volatile oils. They're the smelly, very light, airy parts of the plant that are extracted. And I will get into essential oils in their own episode. I have so much to say about them. So we'll talk about that later, but just know that today we're talking about carrier oils. And there are a ton of different options when it comes to oils. As I said, all skin types can use oil for your skin. It's just about finding the right one for you. And in order to do that, this is where we're going to get to Chemistry 101 as far as skin oils go. Understanding a little bit about the chemical composition can go a long way because thanks to our friend Google, once we know about the ratio of chemicals that's right for our skin, you can look up the breakdown of any oil and determine if it's a good fit or not. Or we can look up oils that are high in a specific compound and seek to purchase or make formulations from those oils. Unfortunately, I don't really look to the comedogenic scale as my guide if an oil is appropriate for a certain skin type. I think it's pretty antiquated. So a comedone is a blackhead. And if something is comedogenic, it is thought to clog the pores. However, that scale is based on tests that were done in the 1930s, so almost 100 years ago. And they were done by putting the oil on the inside of rabbit ears to test if it would clog the pores. The only problem with that is our skin isn't a rabbit ear. And so I don't really think that it's super relevant. Yes, there may be some overlap and it may be like a loose guide that you look at and take with a grain of salt, but I have just seen it fail so many times for so many people because everyone does really have such a unique skin composition that I don't put a ton of stock into it. I'll just say that. So the full chemistry of lipids is super complex and definitely beyond the scope of this podcast episode. And if you want a deeper dive into this, I highly recommend the book, The Power of the Seed by Susan M. Parker. I'll put that in the show notes as well. She's amazing. She has an amazing Facebook group I think it's called Lipid Love. And this book is just my Bible when it comes to understanding different oils as skincare ingredients. I think it's a must-have if you are an esthetician and interested in ingredients. So just like with food, we have saturated fat and we have unsaturated fat. Saturated fat is solid at room temperature and it has a single carbon bond. Unsaturated fats are liquid at room temperature and they have double and triple carbon bonds. Carbon atoms are like the building blocks of all organic compounds. And you can imagine these carbon atoms like Lego blocks. They're atoms that love to connect with each other and form different structures. And this will be relevant, I promise, so just stick with me. These bonds are like the connections between Lego blocks where they snap together, holding them together to build something. So think of the bond like that little area on the Lego block where it pops up and then it connects into another Lego. Carbon atoms can make different types of bonds with each other, just like how Lego blocks can connect in lots of different ways. So a single bond is like when two blocks are connected together in one spot. It's a strong connection, but it's still going to allow that block to rotate and move. And then a double bond is like when two Lego blocks are connected by two pieces. It's a stronger connection that doesn't allow for as much movement. And then a triple bond is like when the Lego blocks are connected in three places. So this is the strongest connection and the blocks are stuck together really tightly. Saturated fats all have single bonds between their carbon atoms. This makes them straight. And again, this is why they're solid at room temperature. And then unsaturated fats like essential fatty acids have one or more double bonds between carbon atoms. And so this is going to create kinks or bends in the chain, and this makes them liquid at room temperature. So what does this mean for the skin? Saturated fats on the skin have a straight structure without the kinks, and they tend to stack together really tightly, kind of like how logs might stack up on a wood pile. They form a barrier with this tight structure that helps to trap moisture and keep your skin hydrated. They're super occlusive and they're not readily taken up by the tissue. They provide an excellent barrier against the elements. They are protective for compromised skin, fantastic for diaper rash, eczema, healing a wound. And this is amazing, but because they're so tightly formed, the barrier becomes almost suffocating over time, and it does have the ability to disrupt the skin's function and the skin's own ability to produce its own oils. And a list of saturated fatty acids, which this is how, if you're looking up, like, what's the chemical composition of coconut oil, or tallow is a saturated fat, or shea butter, you would look for these oils in that list. So lauric acid, palmitic acid, stearic acid, these are all fatty acids. They're the building blocks of oils. They're like the ingredient inside of the ingredient. And these all have that really tight single bond. When you use a skincare product containing unsaturated fats, they tend to feel lighter and a little bit more easily absorbed into the skin. And this is because they are bent structures, allowing them to spread out and penetrate the skin more effectively. It's kind of like a flexible rope that can weave into the skin's structure, providing hydration and nourishment without feeling heavy or greasy. They're going to be taken up by the tissue much more easily. And they also help to support our skin's natural barrier function, and they don't impede on the skin's ability to do what it needs to do to respirate, to produce its natural barrier. And two main fatty acids, again, these are the building blocks for oils, the ingredient inside of the ingredient. Two that you want to pay attention to with unsaturated fats are called oleic acid, which is an omega 9, and linoleic acid. Oleic acid is more suitable for people with dry or mature skin. It's got very moisturizing properties, and it helps to lock in moisture, making it beneficial for those dry skin types. And it's very common with somebody with very dry skin to be deficient in oleic acid. So if you are, again, looking up the chemical composition of an oil, something that's high in oleic acid might be really good for you if you have dry skin. That could include olive oil, avocado oil, macadamia nut oil. Anything more heavy generally is going to be higher in oleic acid, as long as it's still liquid at room temperature. And then the other one that I wanted us to pay attention to is called linoleic acid. This is an omega 6, and linoleic acid is much more suitable for people with oily or acne-prone skin. It has a much lighter texture, and it helps to regulate oil production, making it beneficial for balancing excess oil on the skin, and it's great for preventing clogged pores. It's very common for somebody who has excess oil production to have a deficiency in linoleic acid. It's a polyunsaturated fatty acid, and oils that are high or rich in linoleic acid include hemp seed oil, borage seed oil, rosehip, raspberry seed, watermelon seed, evening primrose. And linoleic acid is actually part of our skin's natural makeup. And one really interesting benefit of linoleic acid is that it does have some natural protection for the sun. And so that's, one really beautiful thing that polyunsaturated fatty acids can do for our skin. Other polyunsaturated fatty acids, also known as PUFAs, include alpha linoleic acid and gamma linoleic acid. They're both super supportive to the barrier function. They both help to reduce inflammation, redness, itchiness, and examples include sea buckthorn, chia seed, cranberry seed. And so when you're looking at these, they are polyunsaturated fatty acids. And this is where the debate about PUFAs in skincare comes in. There are some that out there that recommend avoiding PUFA oils because they're toxic. I see it in marketing, especially with inside of the ancestral wellness community. Oftentimes with a tallow skincare company, that might be part of the marketing. And basically, the idea behind this is that because PUFA oils are more prone to oxidation compared to saturated and monounsaturated fatty acid oils, that we should avoid them completely because they can oxidize in the sun and be more problematic than they are helpful. And this is true to a point. Exposure to heat, light, oxygen will oxidate these oils if care is not taken. However, just because an oil has the potential to oxidize does not mean that it will. And I think it's really important that we look back at our ancestral history and see that these beautiful oils have been utilized for a very long time in their cold pressed form for skin protection, and not all oils are created equally. So, as I said, just because an oil has the potential to oxidize does not mean that it will. Here is how a skincare company can offset oxidation in their oils. Number one, formulating with antioxidants like vitamin E or rosemary oil. Number two, packaging. So the packaging should come in bottles that don't allow light in, an opaque bottle or an amber bottle, blue, or my favorite is violet, which often looks like a black bottle. Packaging with an airless pump is also an option, but the downside of this would mean that it would need to be plastic, which it can also leak into the oil. So that's a whole other podcast episode. But paying attention to not leaving the top off of your oil bottle, paying attention to how often your oil is exposed to oxygen is important. Cold pressed extraction versus industrial style heat extraction is really important. And you're really only going to know this about a company if they are a transparent company and if they're excited about sharing this with you. It is more expensive. And so these oils may be potentially more expensive. But getting to know where your products are coming from, what kind of a company, what kind of an understanding this company has about the oils and how fragile they are is really important. And then also, it's important to note that these oils naturally have antioxidants built in to reduce oxidation. And the real issue here is assuming that the oil has already oxidized as it's been sitting on the shelf. Because it is going to take a little while. It's not like if there's an oil that has no oxidation, if you put it on your skin, it's immediately going to become a problem. It will take some time. And so we want to have an oil that has been preserved in the bottle as well as it possibly can. And this is why small batch processing is also so important. So it's not sitting on a shelf for a very long time. And this is why we really want to pay attention with our expiration date on our packaging, and not utilize products that are past their expiration date, because they can start to oxidize over time, and that will cause more harm than good for the skin. So all of this to say, those who are warning against PUFAs are not completely wrong, but I don't think that they're taking nuance into account. Small batch intentional skincare is not the same as big box industrial style highly processed skincare that doesn't take these things into consideration. And additionally, it's not the same as PUFAs in the food industry. I do see that as a problem. I do see that we should obviously avoid highly processed foods. The food industry is generally going to utilize an extraction process, which is highly industrialized, high heat. It's generally going to be sitting on a shelf for a long time, especially if it's a packaged food. And so I think, as always, it's just really important to consider the nuance, consider the source, consider if it's fear mongering, if it's a blanket statement about everything. Maybe that doesn't resonate as well. So this brings us to tallow. I've actually held off talking about this for a while, because it's a highly controversial topic in the wellness slash ancient ancestral living community, and in the holistic esthetician space. And people feel very passionate one way or another. So I decided that I wanted to always stay curious. I wanted to always challenge my own dogma. And I wanted to use tallow before I really made up an opinion about it. And my opinion, long story short, is that it's, again, nuanced. Tallow is rendered animal fat, and it does have a really long history of use. It can be very protective for the skin. Like I was talking about earlier, animal fats have been used, especially in northern climates, to protect against cold, to protect against wind and other harsh elements. And I have personally seen great success for my eczema with tallow, and I've also really liked it for dry, cracked heels. Tallow is particularly rich in stearic acid, palmitic acid, which, if you remember back to unsaturated versus saturated fats, those are both fatty acids of the unsaturated fat family. And then it's also rich in oleic acid, which is an unsaturated fat, and it's that one that can be deficient if you have dry skin. And then it has very small amounts of linoleic acid. So knowing what we know now, what we've talked about, we know that it's quite rich in saturated fatty acid, and it can provide an excellent occlusion. However, it may not be best for long term, and it even has the potential to disrupt the normal functioning of the skin, because of that really rich saturated fatty acid component. And then because of its rich oleic acid, which again may be depleted in dry skin types, this can be good for drier skin types, but it has the potential to be more irritating and disrupting for oily skin types. So for this reason, my professional opinion is that it can be really helpful for things like diaper rash or a wound, eczema, cracked heels, like I said. And in the short term, it may feel really helpful for that disrupted barrier. If your skin is really dry and rough, and maybe it has a potential for redness, that's a disrupted barrier. And in the short term, this might feel really helpful, but it's not actually solving the problem of why your barrier is disrupted. And for this reason, I feel like if we're using tallow as like our cure all for that, it's kind of a reductionist approach to it. We need to look at the body as a whole and see why it's not producing the correct oil balance and the correct ceramides and natural moisture factor that the skin needs. Like, why is the microbiome disrupted? And so rather than taking that reductionist approach, maybe tallow is a great short term option for that as a band aid, as you're also trying to address the root cause. And I see this the same with something like shea butter, also an unsaturated fatty, or excuse me, also a saturated fatty acid. I find these ingredients to be light years better than petro oils, which are an entirely different class of oil than the natural oils that we've been talking about. They're made as a byproduct of the coal industry, but they're going to do the same thing on the skin as a saturated fat. So they're going to provide an occlusive layer to protect the skin. But the problem is they are a petro oil. And so for me, as a holistic practitioner, that's not something that I prefer to engage in. And so I think tallow is a much better option there. So I also think it's not problematic when utilized as a soap or a cleanser or even as a massage medium that's going to be removed and not meant to sit on the skin for long periods of time. I feel the same way about coconut oil, which is also a saturated fat. What I like about tallow is that it supports honoring an animal's life by working with it nose to tail. I love to cook with it. And I think that we're moving in the right direction to work with these elements of the animal, to respect the animal in that way rather than to discard them. And all of that to say, if tallow works for you and if you feel really good about it and you like it on your skin and you've been using it for a long time and your skin is not becoming drier, it's not becoming irritated, then that's awesome and more power to you. You are the one who knows your body best. At the same time, do be aware that the chemical composition may be disrupting your barrier over a long period of time. And so just keep an eye on that and then do what's best for you. So when it comes to oils, I like a nice blend over a single oil. Rosehip seed, for example, is a really lovely oil that's rich in linoleic acid, or hemp seed is the same situation. On their own, they may be very drying on the skin, especially if you already have dry skin. But you may want rosehip seed for its exceptional vitamin C content. Instead of straight rosehip seed, you might find it in a blend or blend it with something that's a little bit richer or heavier. Additionally, a blend is great because you are getting more nutrients. It's kind of like the difference between eating the rainbow and just eating Brussels sprouts every day. So let's shift our focus to moisturizers. When it comes to moisturizers, it's an emulsified water and oil put together and made cohesive with an ingredient called an emulsifier. Emulsifiers pull water to oil. However, when they're a really strong emulsifier, they can't really tell the difference between the oil in the product and the oil on your skin. So they can pull the oils from your barrier, and the next time you wash your face, these oils get washed away. This is called the washout effect. And this is why I'm not a fan of really creamy creams, even though they feel really good. You can actually get addicted to them. This is why I'm not a huge fan of CeraVe or Cetaphil or micellar waters, because they're basically just a lot of strong emulsifiers with water. There are some that seem not to be as harmful. So, like lecithin and xanthan gum, I'm fine with those in my skincare. And I'll get deeper into emulsifiers in another episode if that's something that interests you guys. But what you need to know for the purposes and the scope of this episode is that if you want to avoid them altogether, you can work with your face oil and a hydrosol, which I talked about on the last episode, and rub them together in your hand, effectively emulsifying it, and then apply it to your face. You've just made a cream right there. It's important to note that oil alone isn't enough for the skin and that there does need to be that water component. And I talked about that last week, why our skin cells need that water component. And so I highly recommend doing this step together, oil with the tonic in your hands, if you want to avoid those emulsifiers. And that's not to demonize creams. I sell creams in my shop. And I think that there are some really lovely ways to formulate with less aggressive emulsifiers. But if that feels confusing and you don't want to feel like you have to dig through the ingredients to know if the emulsifier is going to be stripping your barrier or not, this is a great option. Oils will be your last step in your skincare routine. The exception to that is if you're wearing sun protection, then that would go on last so that you're not diluting the sun protection when you're applying the oil. But the oil is really there to seal everything in. So today we broke down the chemical composition of oils and why different oils are better for different skin types, and we gave some examples. I talked about the debate around both PUFAs and tallow. I talked about moisturizers and how you can actually make a cream in your hands. I hope that this has brought some insight and made you feel empowered as the consumer about making choices for your skin. I hope it gave you some things to Google and gave you some things to think on. I'm so grateful for you tuning in. Next week, I'll be talking all about eye creams and do you even need one? I'm going to talk about how to get rid of dark circles or reduce them, how to reduce puffiness around your eyes. I would love it if you would subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. You can find me most of the time hanging out on Instagram or in my community, Rooted Well. Have a wonderful week and be well.